Hi everyone, it's been a long time since I've posted an update. YouTube has been rejecting one of the videos I've been uploading, and anyway, I've been really busy over the past few days, so sorry for the lack of an update. But anyway, today I decided to head down to my friendly local game store for a small little tournament. There were less than 10 people there, so it wasn't the biggest of tournaments, but everyone put up a good fight. Definitely it gave me a run for my money, and eventually I managed to place joint first, so I'm more than happy for that. Fun and prizes aside, I'm here to talk about the two decks that helped me achieve victory today. Today I'll just talk about my runner deck, which is Silhouette. You all probably have seen this before. It's the same Silhouette deck that I've been playing in my previous videos. It's a run event based Silhouette deck that uses the Central Breaker Suite and Knight to pressure all servers. I tell people it's a variation of my pretty successful Gate Knight deck. So I guess you really can't teach an old dog new tricks in this meta where criminals are suffering more and more, as the new data packs are starting to really cause problems for criminals. I'm still sticking through with it, and at least I'm still finding some success with it. Alright, so since it was a small tournament, I didn't get to play a lot of opponents. In fact, I only faced against two distinct IDs, and both of them were Jinteki. Very different types of Jinteki though. One is flatline based Jinteki with Personal Evolutions ID contributing to the mix, and the other is Tenet Institute. No remote servers, just fast advance with Trick of Light. Yep, same old thing. Every single game seeing red. In the end, my Silhouette managed a win rate of 100% against Jinteki PE and a win rate of 0% against Tenet Institute. So yeah, it is very clear that my Silhouette deck is really based on the early game, and if it cannot get to a solid start, once servers become way too taxing as Tenet Institutes like to set up, there's no way my Silhouette deck can recover, and that weakness definitely showed in my games. More on that later. As for Jinteki PE, I basically stomped over everyone because I have had enough flat lines due to Step Techie, and I do know how to play against it. Even though I only start with 40 hit points and have no means of recovering with Levi AR lab access unlike Chaos Theory, Silhouette offers a huge advantage with her Expose ability, which completely nullifies any chance of Jinteki PE pulling off any shenanigans. And since Jinteki PE has no way of fast advancing, every time they put a gender down, there is a very good chance that I'll end up stealing it. The Expose really countered the Jinteki PEs very hard, more so than the net damage countered my small deck size. So let's talk about my deck. As I said, it's a run event based deck, and with that we have the backbone of Plan Assault and Same Old Thing, which means that I can summon any event that I like, run event from my deck at any time I want. Yeah, it's on demand really, and yeah, that's how my Silhouette deck functions as a Swiss Army knife. You really cannot escape from my multi-server pressure, and multi-server indeed, because I have cards that punish R&D, Indexing and Maker's Eye, HQ, Legwork and the Infamous and Siphon, even Archives with Retrieval Run. Retrieval Run saw zero use in my games today, but that's because I kept drawing it late, didn't draw it in order with Femme Fatale, etc. And I didn't really need to recover any lost breakers. So Retrieval Run is more of there as a backup, and I didn't need it today. But against some other deck types, different story, especially against Archers and Wayland, if I'm not prepared for that. Blackmail is a silver bullet against Wayland, especially Grundle. There is no way they are going to score in remotes with my Blackmail around, and that's the only way they're going to get agendas out. So it really is there to counter Wayland, and with good reason, because especially with Grundle is the only deck that is faster than my Silhouette. Because Grundle makes me worry about running into servers with insufficient money. The threat of Sea Scorch is always there, and it's something that I cannot afford to be afraid to make runs because of. If I stop running against Grundle, my game's over, because my whole game plan revolves around running. If I cannot make runs, there's no game. So Blackmail is a must. There were no Wayland decks that I faced against today, so this card was a blank draw as well. Finally, we have a double insect job. Many people have been moving away from inside job even within the criminal faction. It is still a horribly strong card, especially in silhouette, because it allows you. I don't just use it to assault remotes. There were no remotes to assault in this game, but this tournament. But I managed to pull off 1 or 2 inside jobs on key servers, especially HQ, to trigger emergency shutdown, and most importantly, silhouette's ID ability. Inside job is basically intelligence card. You gain a lot of information regarding their eyes if they choose to res it, or if they choose not to res it, you go in and you review the eyes that you want to res anyway. So it's very, very important. It's less important in my Gate Knight deck, Gabriel Santiago, because the 2 credits not that important. But here it is fantastic. Alright, so moving on to the Breaker Suite. I think most other competitive criminal decks don't run this many icebreakers. I have a grand total of 11 icebreakers. That is more than a quarter of my deck. Most criminals run 8 cards of icebreakers at the very most. This redundancy is very important because nowadays there are so many ways in which programs can be trashed, power shutdown, and program trashes. Yeah, you don't want to land on a situation where you lose because you're shut out of servers completely due to not having the correct breaker. And more importantly, if you notice, every single breaker in my suite costs less than 3 to install. That is fantastic. This means that I can put out so much early game pressure. You won't believe it. It's so cheap to install, and it's not that good for breaking taxing servers, but it is fantastic for getting through early game, and that's all that matters because that's what my deck is focused on. I'm faster than most decks, window aside, so this is what helps me accomplish it. The fairies were a big boon in today's games because I'm up against Jinteki, which may or may not pack Komainus, Surugis. You never know, and you don't want to find out the hard way. So you let the fairy hit the table and let it do its job. Just sitting on the table makes the runner think, the Corp think twice about raising that piece of ice. And if they raise it, they lose a lot of money, but don't get any benefit out of it. Very, very good stuff. The singleton Femme Fatale, always a must. Against Jinteki with lots of sentries, you don't want to have only 3 lives with your 3 fairies. Once they're all gone, that's it. Yep. And I'm not running any special orders at all because my breaker redundancy is so high. There is no need for icebreaker tutor at all. Special order is actually quite a big waste of time and money because you're spending 1 click and 1 credit just to get a breaker out. That is quite a huge tempo hit. Why do so when you can just install the breaker from hand? That's exactly what I'm doing. And if you think about it, even though I only have 2 code gate breakers and 2 barrier breakers, the knights essentially mean that I have 5 of each. If I draw into any of these, I can break through a single piece of barrier or code gate. Be it a wraparound, be it a quandary, I can get through, and that's all that matters early on. When the Corp doesn't have much ice, I don't have to worry about getting the breach out just to get through 3 barriers. I just throw the knight down, I run that server, and I'll score my agendas. Triple the Corp from there. So, with that said and done, let's move on to the rest of the cards in my suite. We have the very standard cards such as Sure Gamble, Desperado, Armitage, Code Busting, very standard economy cards. We have Diesel, which I spent my final 2 influence on. I have nothing better to spend with my influence, so I get card draw, which is very important, especially against Jinteki Flatline. It really helped against that. And Logos, because I came into this tournament with a personal challenge to do as well as I can with only 1 core set, which means no Desperado, no double Desperado. So I substituted a second Desperado with some advice from one of you loyal YouTube viewers with a Logos, which gives 2 things. Firstly, when the Corp scores an agenda, I can pull out anything from a Sure Gamble, which basically acts like a Desperado. It gives you money. Or I can pull out whatever silver bullets I need. Sneak Door Beta to get through archives into HQ, or maybe an indexing if that's the moment that it calls for it. Logos is a fantastic card that I never use this tournament at all because it never appeared before the Desperado. Either I installed the Desperado early on in my games, or I never had a console at all. Sometimes the MU limit was too hard was quite a factor, but most of the time I found myself pretty okay. That being said, I would definitely include 3 Desperados if I could. Moving on, Katie Jones. usually there's not much to say about it, but if you watch my Gate Night video, the one that I use in Regionals and Chronos Protocol, you realize that I don't have Kitty Jones. My rationale for that being that it's too slow for my Gate Night deck, and more importantly, because I run 3 account siphons, I might not clear tags, so Kitty Jones is a liability at that point. Here, it was a lifesaver. Why? Because against Jinteki PE, I was able to use one single card to fuel my economy for the entire game. That single card being Katie Jones, because she essentially provides unlimited money. You just need to drag out the game. That Katie Jones really saved me, because it means that I can use all my sure gambles and Armitage code bustings as net damage order. So yes, including those was one of the wisest choices in terms of economy. Moving on, Bank Drop. Bank Drop saw relatively little use, but it's more for the other factions, especially HBs who like to play naked Eves and Adonises against Wayland, where I can scout out their remote eyes and make lots of money out of it. Bank Drop is a fantastic card that more people should play. I advocate that highly. It works out very well. You have to try out for yourself, because until you get the 7 burst credits from Bank Drop, you really can't tell how good it is. Of course, it's conditional on the enemy making a remote, and it didn't help at all in my 10-in matchups, which was a huge pity, because that is where I needed the burst credits the most. Now, 2 emergency shutdowns. These are more for... my deck isn't really that good at credit denial, because I don't run 3 account siphons, I don't run 3 same old things, and I don't run deja vus. But what this allows me to do is that against impatient corps who try to score agendas too quickly, what I can do is to threaten either HQ or archives with Sneak Door, followed by emergency shutdown, then attacking at key server. This is usually a very strong line of play that catches them off guard and requires them to spend a lot more time recovering. Emergency shutdown is great for that purpose, but I didn't face too many big eyes today. The biggest eyes I saw was a Wall of Thorns, and it didn't really do much even in that case. So yeah, more of a dead card today, but still important to have nonetheless. It's a very powerful card, no reason not to run it in Criminal. Finally, a single copy of Sneak Door Beta, just a remnant of my Game Night deck, but it actually paid off big time dividends. Especially against Jinteki PE, I was able to reliably expose cards with Sneak Door on the table, because I have 2 routes to enter. I just have to pick the easiest route for me. It also serves to minimize the uncertainty, because I can expose ice, which means that I know whether I need to dig for my ferry or just run straight through, knowing that I'll be safe. Sneak Door is a very powerful card, and definitely a worthy one-off. Not something I want to include more of, because I already have 2 cards that punish the Corp for not icing up their archives, Sneak Door and Retrieval Run. Any more would be pretty redundant and work against me in terms of generating dead draws. There are a few common key traits in successful runner decks, such as good economy, efficient breakers, etc. I feel that one of the important criteria is the ability to exploit the vulnerable archives, whether it be data sucker for data sucker tokens, security testing to force them to ice up archives, or in this case, Sneak Door Beta. It makes games much easier, because corps are forced to place ice, spend dedicated time and money onto a server that is otherwise pretty useless. So that's the rationale behind Sneak Door Beta, and it definitely paid off. Now, there is one more card in my deck. That is 39 cards so far. The last card in my deck is Data Dealer. Again, a silver bullet card. I put this in simply because this was a tournament with the latest data pack, Legal, being upstock, which contains domestic sleepers. I was preparing myself to get 9 credits for the price of 2 clicks if I managed to steal one of these useless agendas. Not so useless anymore, and that's a huge burst of credits that I'll need against matchups which have very taxing eyes in the form of Nyx Bronze and Nyx Silver. Once again, I didn't get to see any of these decks. Instead, all I saw were Shikyus from Jinteki, which is just as sweet. In one game, I managed to sack a Shikyu that brought me from 5 agenda points to 6. Later on, I managed to score the winning agenda, which was a 1-pointer. Had it not been for the data dealer, the game would have gone on. I might not have won, because I was getting low cards. So, data dealer, not so useless anymore. Good stuff. Alright, so here were some notable plays that I made this tournament. There was one game where the Jinteki player saw that I exploited my weakness. Astutely enough, he saw that I was playing all central breakers, so he made a remote, a 3 ice remote, to prepare against inside job, and started advancing a future perfect in there. So on my turn, I hopped the knight onto one piece of ice, femme fatale another piece of ice, and inside job to get the outermost piece of ice done. There was nothing he could do about it, and the future perfect basically won me the game. So this is what I really love about criminals. It's their ability to get into the remote servers at their will. Inside job knight is one of the scariest, most potent combos in the game. Femme fatale just icing on the cake, really, when it comes to the late game. So that is why it's more or less necessary to play Ashe or Caprice if you are playing competitively and are attempting to score agendas through a remote. You need Ashe and Caprice to protect that remote, because Ice just doesn't cut it nowadays. There are too many runner tools out there to deal with remotes. Even if it's just for trying to get an agenda through, leaving it vulnerable in the server for one turn is a huge liability. There was another game where Tenin Institute installed a pub over HQ. Well, I was more than happy to see that. It's a completely porous piece of ice. One siphon later, I got into HQ, drained him to 0 credits, and because of that, his R&D was free for my picking. Even if it's a Yagura on top of R&D, if you have 0 credits, you can't do anything about it. So, never ever place porous ice over HQ against criminals. And if you do, please don't res it. But of course, this doesn't really apply to me, because I'm Silhouette and I can easily reveal your HQ ice. And that is the quandary that Silhouette poses. With Gabe, the quandary he poses is that if you let him in, he'll snowball out of control with credits. With Silhouette, it's, well, I'm going to see your HQ ice no matter what you put on there, so you better just res it anyway, and I will completely exploit that by siphoning you down to the ground after that. So this is why Silhouette is strong. So much for that. What about the weaknesses? As I said, Ashe and Caprice are huge problems, and that was what I faced today. The other thing, in conjunction with taxing servers, I was playing against Tenin Institute, and once we got past the early game stage, I found myself completely doomed for. He had basically 4 iced centrals, and Archives was doubly iced. Every time I was not making a run, he would be gaining tokens, which he would eventually use to fast advance. To make things worse, there was a Caprice Mise on R&D, so there was no way I was going to get into R&D. I knew HQ had no agendas, and anything done with Archives, well, be prepared to eat the shocks from Archives. So yeah, it felt like I was completely suffocated. This deck is meant to win early, win hard. If you don't do it by the end of the early game, you can take the white flag out of your bag and wave it, because there's nothing much else you can do. So yeah, I definitely got holes against Tenin, and that is definitely a very vital weakness of my Silhouette deck. I definitely don't think criminals are the strongest runners anymore. I definitely feel like this is the month of the Shapers. It's Shapers' time to shine against Jinteki and against taxing Corps. But right now I'm just playing a relatively strong criminal deck, but more importantly, I'm playing it because it suits my personal playstyle, and really that's one of the most important things you can do. To be very comfortable with the deck that you're playing with, to know its ins and outs, to know all its tricks, all the traps you can lay on the Corp, and just carry your way to victory from that. More important, that is better than trying to play a big rig deck which you're not that used to. And well, my mixed success, I would consider that a victory for me. So I will be posting my review on my Tenin deck a little later. But thanks for watching for now, and happy night running yourself. See you around.